For more than 30 years, author and speaker Reverend Eileen Stewart-Rhude has been traveling extensively with a passion to nurture and empower women to be all God created them to be. She has mentored many young people who then quickly rose to positions of leadership in their own communities. Now she has compiled her wisdom into a book, The Leadership Edge: 7 Keys to Dynamic Christian Leadership for Women. And we are so glad that she is now joining us on the Full Circle couch. Eileen, welcome to Full Circle.
Thank you, Ann. It's wonderful to be here.
It's so good to have you. Now, from the title of your book, we know that the book is geared towards women. Why do you think that women actually need some prompting to take that position of leadership?
Well, I think it is, first of all, because there's nothing on the shelves for women specifically on leadership. Lots of wonderful leadership books for men, but nothing for women. And also they are prompted, but they just need someone to help them. A woman, something by a woman to help.
Yeah.
They're eager to get out there, but the principles of leadership for a man, the principles are the same, but the way of leading is different.
Well, you
than
say
for
that
a woman.
women lead from a position of influence and nurture.
Yes,
and men
nurture.
lead from a position of, or lead from, what is it?
Power.
Power and
Yeah,
position.
position,
Now that's
right.
interesting. So we're influential and they're more positional.
Right, exactly.
So what does that mean?
Yeah.
They're just a little more, no, I shouldn't be that. I'm supposed to be encouraging towards that. But what I mean, you know what I
It
mean,
means they
Eileen.
do it wrong and we do it right.
Right.
No, I'm only kidding.
And we strike that from the record. No, what we're saying is, explain that.
Well, what is written for men is written from a male perspective. So that is wonderful for men. There's nothing wrong with it. But women need to be encouraged that because they're a little different, they feel differently about leadership than everything they read in a book by a man. They need the comfort to know, oh, maybe I am all right, maybe I am leading all right.
Well, our starting place is different than a
It
man's
is,
starting
it
place.
is.
And let's be honest, like, there are definitely some things that a man can do in a position of leadership that a woman can't do. It's perceived completely differently.
And what is that, Bridget?
You know the stereotype that, assertive, aggressive leadership
That's
is
true.
a very manly trait, whereas with a female, there's a
Right, if she
particular...
did that, there would be some issues.
Exactly, right? So,
And women lead with influence, by influence really, and nurture, as we've said already.
And more collaborative, right? I think we
Exactly.
kind of like to know that everybody's on board with this and that Maggie's happy and growing in her gifts. And so that's one of the differences you said with men.
Yes.
Now, Eileen, what mistakes do you think women make in leadership? Because we're talking about sometimes women want to be liked, and so that can kind of get in the way. What are some mistakes that we make that kind of can harm our leadership from growing?
I would say one of the first things is trying to maybe be the same as men, or by usurping or pretending you can do everything. Women don't have to push doors down. They don't have to knock doors down to have an open opportunity for leading. Because if they do, there's going to be a red flag go up for them. So I think to be gracious, to just know your calling, to know what God has called you to do, and to do it with grace and with the power of the Holy Spirit. He opens the door for us.
And to have confidence, I think is what you're saying, Maggie and Eileen, is to have confidence in the giftings God's given you and not to worry so much about what other people think about you taking that leadership position, but having it more of a this way conversation than a this way conversation. So you know that God has given you these gifts, He's opened the doors, and then you step through them in confidence.
That's risky for a lot of women, though, Eileen. I mean, you've taken a posture here in your book of the assumptive place where all women would be free to just lead in whatever capacity. That's what I'm assuming as I read the book. And I know for some women, that's not a real reality. And some women, I mean, even I have to say for myself, have had to really fight hard, really, to be heard, to be in places of leadership, just as far as, whether it has been my own gender or whether it has been, other things. And so I think that's really been encouraging that you come at it where, we all have a place in leadership and influence. And here's some 7 steps in which you can cultivate even stronger, more powerful leadership. But I think that's encouraging. It doesn't come from a place, well, if you have that opportunity, then do this. It's we take the role that, no, you do this,
Yes, I was going to say The first chapter, the first part of the book, talks about the call, being confident of your call, knowing what your call is. You don't always, from the beginning, know all of your gifts. They develop. God develops them in you as you go along. And I found that I didn't think, now I'm going to be a leader, so I'm going to start doing all these things, so I'll develop that. It happens. It just happens. Even in your very youth, if you look back at your own life as a youth, there were signs and obvious things in your life that you would have to realize, yes, those were leadership skills showing themselves. But I think one of the first things we need to settle is that we are called by God. And we may not be called necessarily to an upfront leadership at the time. It may be something in a very small way and not hardly noticed. But if you know that God has called you, that's the confidence you were speaking about, Anne. There's a confidence then. And no matter what opens for you or closes for you, you can always say, well, I know God has called me, and I know the door will open.
I know that's a good point, because I think when we hear leadership, we think of front, we think of the pastor, we think of all of these public roles. And so it's a good point, Eileen, that you can be a leader and still be a little bit behind the scenes and still be leading in that in that area.
And you can be a leader who is up front.
Exactly.
And that's very freeing and encouraging for many of the women, I think, women that are listening too, right?
And all of the personality types are different. Because I know that if you're a natural born leader like Melinda and you are just up front and you are there and take charge and you do it beautifully, that it might come more naturally for you. Whereas someone, who's a little more reluctant, such as myself, to be an upfront person, in the past I was always, when I was in university, I was scared to death to take speech. I had to take speech to graduate from university. And I put it off and put it off and it was just, I got sick to my stomach every time I had to make a speech in front of a class of 12 people. And now, God has been inching me forward little by little by little to the point where I'm, like you say in your book, Eugene Peterson, the quote from him, it's a long obedience in the same direction. When we sense God calling us to do this, it doesn't mean we have to take this huge step right off the bat. It's that we have to just say, okay, God, I'm going to take that one baby step first, and then you will bless that obedience, because God always promises to bless obedience, and then he'll lead us into more and more. And that's what I got from your book, is God gives you more as you take more steps.
Right.
Now, Eileen, you make a distinction in your book between a good leader and a visionary leader. And some people might not understand the concept, so can you explain that?
Yes, I wondered about that myself. Well, a good leader is a good leader across the board, just is wise and has wisdom and so on. I would say a visionary leader is one who sees the big picture. Someone who has a vision, they just... they see something, they see the invisible out there. Other people may not see it, they're just doing their work day by day, but they have a vision, they see something happening out before them that no one else may see. So that's a visionary leader. A visionary leader has to be a good leader as well. Good leaders are good leaders across the board in every way, so one is not better, but God does call those who are visionary, who can see a big picture.
Well, you have a quote here at the beginning of chapter 2, only those who can see the invisible can do the impossible.
Exactly.
Okay, so here's a question. I was going to ask, where did you guys land when you read the different leaderships, naturally where you landed on what were you? Because I landed, I'll just say, maybe it gives you thought to think of where I landed on inspiring leadership, more in like the motivation, optimism. But on the flip side, the problem with sometimes in the inspiring leadership and the charisma, what Anne's saying, is the perseverance and the deepening of character in that. Because sometimes you can ride on charisma, the presence, the woo, and yet you will burn out in 5 months. But my challenge in this, because I was kind of really wanting to hone in on where I automatically felt myself go as a leader, and what was great about your book is that you said, great, however, here's the places where you will need to fill in the longevity, the perseverance, and you give good things. You say, you need to be optimistic and have really good self-talk, put words of scripture in you, and you need to take care of yourself. But I just thought that was great. So Maggie, what do you think? What would
You know what? Honestly, I have fought this whole leadership thing for a while. And, you know, I said to you as soon as I walked in, I loved your book because I'm at that point where I don't think I want to embrace the fact that I have a leadership role. And so I've kind of been a little afraid about embracing leadership and even accepting my calling. And so it was interesting reading this, and as you talked about different people, you talked about Lorna Duick and her embracing her calling. And it made me think about, what is my calling? I've really been searching with God. So I'm not even there yet, Melinda. I'm just trying
I was going to say, this is an intervention right now. Step into the fear of leadership.
This book so was an intervention.
But you